Welcome to Funding and Disrupting, the most in-depth business podcast for companies looking to raise money and the investors who fund them. Every episode, we interview a funded founder, plus the investor who funded them, to get the real story of how it all came together. If you're searching for funding for a disruptive technology or business, or you're searching for the best companies to invest in, then you've come to the right place. This episode of Funding and Disrupting is brought to you by Oura Collective, a leading tech PR and marketing firm. Let's get funding and disrupting.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Funding and Disrupting, presented by Oura Collective. Today, we'll be digging into the personal story of Rusty Matveev, the co-founder and chief strategy officer of Calaxy, also known as the Creators Galaxy. Creators Galaxy is a social media super app designed by creators for creators. Creators of all types can offer more direct and intimate experiences to their fans through a suite of familiar and new features. Rusty's fellow co-founder is Spenser Dinwiddie, the NBA basketball player that plays for the Brooklyn Nets. Spenser played college basketball for the Colorado Buffaloes. He also earned first-team all-conference honors in the Pac-12 when he was a sophomore. That was back in 2013 at William Howard Taft High School in Woodland Hills, California, which is a suburb of Los Angeles. Welcome to the show, Rusty. Funding and Disrupting. How are you today?
Doing well. Thank you, Keith, for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Sure. We're excited to hear your story and share with our audience and give them some, flavor of what it's like being an entrepreneur and the road to funding. So, Rusty, you're located up in Boston, if I'm not mistaken. And you're an East Coast guy, correct?
Yes, correct. I've been all over, but currently in the Boston area.
Right. Okay. So how does a guy like you run into a guy like Spenser, who's from Woodland Hills, California? I actually know where that is because I've lived there the majority of my life in LA. So how did you run into him?
Yeah, that's definitely a funny and synergistic story. I've been a fan in general of basketball and all the leagues, but of Spenser since college. I'm a University of Washington Huskies fan, so Pac-12, and saw him play in college quite a bit. At my previous stop at Madison Square Garden Ventures, kind of running into various people at conferences and, always been aware of Spenser. I happened to run into just a college friend and a colleague of his, a business partner. And one thing kind of led to another. I've heard a little bit about his angel investments and kind of wanted to get to know a little bit more. And
but tell us the real story. I mean, we guys out at a bar drinking, talking about comedy. I mean, where'd you actually meet?
Yeah, no, funny enough, nothing like that. The first time we actually met was at NBA All-Star break a few years back. So that was like the first in-person meeting. I started kind of being a person working for him, and we started making plans to formalize essentially either a venture fund effort or a family office style effort, kind of helping creators get more access into venture capital. So it was really on that front, pushing into that, and then our relationship started building from there.
Terrific. So why don't you tell us briefly about yourself and how you got into the world of technology and landed into the role of chief strategy officer?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like I've been an entrepreneur longer than I realized what that word even was or meant. My family and father was very much entrepreneurial, starting as a first generation immigrant. They started kind of a limo or town car company well before anything like Uber existed. So as like a 9, 10, 11-year-old, my family moved from New York to Seattle. And I found myself spending summers literally being like the coordinator for his company because his English wasn't that great. And I was dealing with, corporate partners and hotels and all this kind of stuff. And eventually they'd all meet me and be like, what? This kid's like 10 years old. So, going way back to that, I've had startups really since, formal startups since college, lots of failures, lots of learnings, finally some good ones. Landed in the world of venture at Madison Square Garden Ventures back in 2016. So really, that was my first foray into investing. And spent a couple, 3 years there and really, never let go of my entrepreneurial stuff. I definitely like to build. And that's kind of how I came across, again, Spenser and this group and got that itch to jump onto the operator side again with Calaxy. And so kind of the rest is history. But yeah, a good journey of evolution between founder entrepreneurship and then eventually investor.
So it's interesting that, you share your background and, we hear the story of, a lot of entrepreneurs about their families and, what their parents were like. What is it though that you consider yourself an entrepreneur, obviously, but what are some of the characteristics that you feel are representative of an entrepreneur that really you relate to, that you would identify yourself and say, here are the things that I do every day as just part of my daily life, and that's kind of what defines me as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, great question. Realistically, it's a spectrum. So the big picture vision aspect is something I don't think you can really recreate. And it's not a self-touting comment. It's either like something inspires you about something or it doesn't. I've never been one to be able to, to be in the 9-to-5 world. I mean, it's completely fine for most of the world. And there's like no shade, no disrespect to that. Everyone has to do that. But I just, I feel like from an early age, things have hit me on that front where I saw some path or some opportunity around the corner that I really wanted to pursue. And it just felt right to do it that way. I mean, that's probably the best way to say it. It's difficult to like put a finger on exactly that kind of trait. Beyond that, I would say, the opportunity to see something from the very beginning, from the ground up, to then actually, put it on paper, to then actually put it on code and then release a product. There's just a thrill behind that where you get to really be impactful. So I think, that's a big deal to me, and just wanting to do something a little bit different and not being, not being in a box, I should say, is probably what I'd say.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will certainly relate to that. So why don't you tell us about Calaxy, how it came about, why it's so disruptive, and the initial game plan or roadmap that you had in mind?
Yeah, Calaxy is a unique animal from the standpoint of, really who's behind it, and the brainchild that, kind of came from Spenser. You gave a good background on him. He's very much, his tagline is a tech guy with a jumper kind of thing. And that's not just, that's not just for show. He really does think that way. So, the idea is if this was a company started by me or by, a regular tech or Silicon Valley group, it wouldn't feel the same. It wouldn't have the organic nature. We say for creators, by creators for a reason. And again, that comes from Spenser's background. And I think that's related to, it's resulted into where we're at now. So essentially, this is a tool set for, creators to grow their communities, to create a way more authentic and direct relationship. And then quite frankly, to monetize, their fan base. The idea of people having, I don't care if it's 50,000, 500,000, 5 million followers, but having to go through these third-party portals to kind of determine their value and all these other things, it's very fragmented. If you're controlling, your Instagram, your Twitter, your TikTok, etc., there's all these places you have to go to or manage to have a ubiquitous fan experience, for your community. And so that was the, original vision, was kind of allowing creators to have a more direct portal to, and tool set for their communities. And yeah, and really that was the origin piece, along with, Spenser was in the news quite a bit a little over a year ago for something called tokenizing or securitizing his contract, his sports contract, allowing people to buy into sort of his future earning potential. And that was also part of the kernel. So
for the audience who hasn't had the benefit of being able to look online at Calaxy just yet, why don't you tell us, so to give them an idea, I would describe it as a social influencer platform, where, because it seems that you're targeting initially perhaps creators that are recognizable to kind of spark the project and to get traction. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but from there, and if I'm wrong, correct me. But why don't you tell us what's unique, disruptive about it beyond that aspect? Maybe it's the user interface, because there are other projects in this space. But let's talk about specifically what you feel is really your differentiator.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit on the initial one, right? The initial one is who we actually have on there. We obviously are biased, but personally believe we have the best, most comprehensive, list so far in terms of the social token space or the crypto space. Again, on the surface level, we very much feel like a social app, right? We look and feel like a Twitter or an Instagram, and that's by design. We want to be very, very natural and part of what people are already used to in their, their daily lives. So that was a big deal. But having, the people like Ezekiel Elliott or The Bachelor, Matt James, or, Tiana Taylor on our platform early on it's really exciting for us, because we haven't really pretty much not done any marketing or any BD efforts yet. So once we turn that on, I think this is going to be a really exciting journey, to say the least. As far as, what we're actually doing and what we're allowing, we want to have again, a ubiquitous fan experience. What does that actually mean, right? So a fan should be able to go on to, Ezekiel Elliott's page or Spenser's page and profile and be able to interact with them on a way that they couldn't do that anywhere else, right? So whether that looks like a video that, a good comp is, Cameo, right? Cameo allows you to do pre-recorded videos or eventually I'm assuming live videos as well. So, we have a piece like that in there where, you can request time with an athlete or with not just an athlete, with any creator. So the spectrum of who we have on there, whether it's players like Spenser or sports athletes like Spenser, Ezekiel, all the way to like celebrity chefs or esports players or workout influencers, beauty influencers, etc. It really allows for quite a bit of diversity. And so in one spot, I can request a training or a cooking class, right? I can ask how to swing a golf club or whatever it is that you might follow, right? So there's all those aspects. There's definitely more coming behind the hood, but the idea is I can support my creator of choice in a much more direct way, and even do things like request them to make an appearance somewhere, or should you play at my birthday party, et cetera, et cetera.
So So this is important for the audience, both the founders of tech companies as well as VCs. So I wanted to get into just a couple technical things, but I don't want to get into the weeds. So keep that in mind. So let's say I want time with Spenser. How would this be different than, let's say, if I went to his Instagram, and sent him a message or, tweet it out on Twitter to his Twitter account? I mean, are these people actually going to dedicate time out of their busy schedule, to do this on what kind of commitment does it take for these people? I mean, what's in it for them, and how, realistic is it to actually connect with them?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think that's part of the problem that exists today is what you just said, right? Are they truly there? Is it really them speaking? It's funny. I find that depending on the individual creator, that'll give you the answer in terms of who's actually driving their Twitter or their Instagram, right? It just depends on what they like and what they do, or if they do it at all. I would imagine the Kylie Jenners of the world are going to be significantly different than someone who has 100,000 followers. So what motivates them on Calaxy? I mean, the bottom line is this is an opportunity to, money talks. It's an opportunity to monetize their community, to create essentially a subscription-based type of relationship or not. There's a fan club aspect. There's, transactional type of stuff. So if you are now bidding on something, let's just say, you want Spenser to, answer a question for you, or to, shoot, help you shoot a shot kind of thing. If you're willing to pay, I don't know if it's $50 or $500, it just depends on the creator. If you're willing to pay that money or be part of his fan club and, be paying on a reoccurring basis, essentially that will, that's what catches attention. Obviously, at the end of the day, they have the right to say no or yes, just like any other platform. But I think there's a little bit more incentivization when there's some capital behind it. That's definitely part of the issue. I mean, again, much more to come, but at the lightest level, that's what I would say is a motivating factor.
So on the platform itself, the creators will be able to monetize, and I'm assuming that is the reason for the use of blockchain. Is that correct? For settlements?
At the very least, partially, right? So the decentralization aspect, the concept that, if you're on YouTube or Twitter, you can get deplatformed or your fee structures can change, right? Tomorrow they might say, hey, we're charging you 40, 50% now, et cetera. You don't have any control of that. You also don't have any direct relationship with your actual fan base or the data behind your fan base. That's a big deal. So yes, the blockchain aspect allows us to be transparent. It allows us to be much faster with regards to the funds and the capital. And then also it puts a certain level of control to the creators themselves in the future, where they can vote on things like, the fees that they're sharing with the platform and so on. So very, very much part of it. But I think it's important to point out our user experience is built in such a way that all that feels under the hood. Like you don't feel that you're doing crypto per se. It doesn't look like traditional crypto stuff. So it, again, feels very much social, like, very, very much what we're all used to, I would say.
So, okay. So, look, a lot of people are going to be listening to this and they're going to hear the word crypto and they're going to lose their minds because a lot of people don't fully understand the implications of crypto. I want to be clear on this. This is an actual project that uses blockchain technology for settlements and distribution of payments. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay, so it's for a settlement system to actually add legitimacy to what you're doing. The fact that there may be a token attached to it that you can use to do some transactions is secondary to the reason of why you decided to use blockchain. Is that correct?
Fundamental nature, yes, that is correct.
Okay. Because we're on Funding and Disrupting, obviously you're in the middle of or nearing the end of a round, closing a round. It's an equity round. It's not an ICO, correct?
Yeah, it's definitely not an ICO.
Right. Okay. Well, that's all we need to say.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear. It's a legitimate blockchain project. This, you're running your company like a traditional company, raising capital along normal standards of equity in exchange for capital. And I just want to leave it at that, but I just want the audience to be clear on that aspect. And that's not the primary driver of your project or, the aspect of, potentially utilizing currency on your platform. So let's transition. Let's talk about, how things have changed along the way. How did you start out? What was your initial roadmap? Talk to us about that and how have things changed along the way and what have you done to keep things moving ahead?
Right. So initially, as I briefly mentioned earlier, this all was born out of Spenser tokenizing or securitizing his NBA sports contract, right? So kind of getting a feeler as to, is there demand in this market for that kind of activity? Mind you, this is a huge jump to like the social platform that we're doing now compared to what that was. But the kernel of the idea was very much similar, right? It was democratizing access to creators. What does that actually mean, right? And so like one of the first like ideas beyond that forayed us into the social side was, voting with decisions, right? And that again, whatever the creator wants to do with that. It could be something super, super trivial, right? Spenser's first idea was like, hey, I'm playing the Lakers tonight. Which shoes should I wear? Like, fans choose. All the way out to, I think at one point he did like a tongue-in-cheek tease of, hey, fans, choose my next team when I'm a free agent. Pay me Bitcoin, et cetera. I'll take a minimal contract. I mean, that was not a serious attempt, but he was just kind of teasing out the same concept. So you can imagine where that can go as far as, creators opening their lives to whatever level of comfort they want to, right? What dress should I wear? Who should I date? What movie should I take, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's all kind of part of it. And it evolved into this holistic suite of tools.
So talk to us about your initial fundraising efforts. How did you define your audience for capital and what was the strategy to reach them?
Yeah, this is a very unique time and market, especially in the blockchain space, right? So we had a lot of inbound effort. I mean, we're lucky that Spenser has a profile that he does, and so a lot of attention and inbound was given to us. That would be pretty different than I would say most scenarios. And also, my venture background, allows me to have some certain network that again different than I'd imagine most companies would have, and then even myself in the past before my venture experience. So from a strategy standpoint, we knew we wanted to attack blockchain native investors as well as some non-blockchain, but really we wanted to pursue strategic value. Like we wanted to have people that can help push us in various markets. Like we understand, for example, the Asian markets overall APEC, early adopters there, people are really into what they call KOLs or, creators, key opinion influencers, leaders, et cetera. So we wanted to find people that can help promote us and propagate us to those types of markets. As Spenser likes to say, for example, in China, America has 350 million people in the States. China's got more NBA fans than that. And so that was definitely something that was on our radar initially as well, to kind of have international flavor.
Right. And so it was important to you to have folks on the development side. It wasn't like, hey, Spenser's got, a bunch of buddies in the NBA who can all throw in money. We really need people that can help us develop the platform. So we really need to kind of look at, what's going to help us advance the project, not just money in itself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So how would you describe the response to your pitching efforts from when you started to where you are now?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting evolution there as well. Quite frankly, we've evolved on the product quite a bit and very, very fast over the last 6-9 months. And so the conversations were very much different and it gave us a lot of learning. So focusing in on, sort of specific angles, almost like the thesis of the overall project, right? Just empowering creators, et cetera, or connecting creators in their communities overtook the, blasting out, here are all the features we have. Like we have 10 features on our MVP, et cetera, et cetera. That seemed to be more noise. And we got really good feedback from, even the no's that we received from investors have been really, and I appreciate it, have been really thoughtful, insightful, and well received, because it was just useful. And I can imagine that, we will circle back to those investors in future rounds, or again, for strategic value. So I think that's been a really good experience overall.
Did you keep track of how many people you reached out to? Did you define, an audience of, because I talked with somebody previously who was on the show who said specifically, look, I had an Excel sheet, 110 people, the first 60 people, it was just flat out no, with no explanation, no feedback. And, then we realized, we needed to kind of, get feedback and tweak things. And once we did is when everything changed. So I'm just curious, did you have an initial list? Did you keep track in any way? Do you know how many people roughly it took you until you got traction with the fundraising?
Yeah, actually, I have the Excel kind of open in front of me as well.
Okay, so, typical entrepreneur.
Yeah, we started on an internal sort of, an internal aggregation of, I think it was 280 or so investors across the board. Actually, now it's at 303 right in front of me. So it started a little bit smaller. Not to say that we reached out to all of them, but that was our initial internal list. And we started either cross-checking if we have direct connection to any of these people, can we get warm intros? And then also trying to cross people off just by looking at their portfolio. Did they invest in any, really competitive groups? Are they investing kind of broadly, making a bet in the vertical, and it makes sense to reach out to them, et cetera? So then at the end, I would say we probably only spoke with just less than 100 groups. We probably spoke with like 80 or 70 or so, maybe. Definitely less than I would normally approach, just because, again, we were pretty targeted. So it was a different experience altogether. And quite frankly, we didn't get a lot of no's. I think to date, we've gotten like 5 or 6 formal no's. And to your previous point, a lot of people just, were more like, hey, come back to us, when there's more progress. And that's a typical answer.
Did it seem like it took a certain amount of pitches until you kind of finally got it down and got some traction? In other words, did you go to the best ones first? Did you go to the ones that you thought you had least faith and you thought you'd try your pitch out on them? What was your thought on that?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that's the natural evolution of things too, right? You get better with reps and cycles. So we definitely did not go to the top ones first. We went to a lot of the sort of the closer, friendly friends and family, or people that we could trust to give us like a good feedback that we didn't even necessarily go out to for investment, but we went out to for feedback and opinions. Again, they are investors, but we weren't looking at them in that light. That was a really helpful approach, right? You want to get those warm feedbacks as much as you can, and then venture out. Eventually, it brought us to the top of all the known names that that we're all familiar with in the venture space. But yeah, I would say it was an evolution for sure.
How much capital are you currently raising in the round that you're in, and how much have you raised to date out of the round?
Yeah, so we set out to raise $5 million on what's called a SAFT. So it's similar to a convertible note. It just includes equity and tokens. So we are actually happy to say that we're currently oversubscribed and are considering expanding the round a little bit beyond 5. Again, the market is hot. The terms are favorable, and it just makes sense to continue to bring on specifically strategics. It's not. I don't think anyone in our group is just financially driven. It's everyone's got like some flavor of strategic value.
For people who are listening to hear $5 million, that's a lot of money. How much, give them an idea of how much has already gone in, and briefly where the source of the money came in from.
Yeah.
Just give a better idea, because when people talk about, seed rounds, Series A, the lines get blurred for a lot of people. So just kind of give people some context of, what your initial funds were to get it going, to get to this raise, and, where that money came from.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, this is a formal seed round for us. We bootstrapped, for pretty much the last year now, right? So Spenser's personal funds and kind of part of what he had raised from his contract securitization. So he put those proceeds to this effort. So it's really been a lot of that. We were recipients of a grant as well that was a 6-figure grant, and we also have taken in low 6 figures from sort of friends and family. And then as we're recording this podcast, we literally have DocuSigns and wiring instructions out. So we're looking to close in the next week or so at the longest, just until the last wire comes in. So again, this is truly a seed round. I realize 5 million, depending on what coast you're on and what vertical you're in, it might seem like
right.
all around.
So what kind of checks have people been writing for this round?
Yeah,
the range.
Yeah, the average check size has been strongly in the 200 to 250K range, right? So it's been a lot of like, good feelers. Like I would say like smaller seed round checks. We have a lead that's sitting at 7 figures, and we have like kind of a few larger groups that are at the 750 range, but the majority of them are like 200, 250. And then we did a nice pool that was really meant for the creators. You asked an earlier question about the evolution of the capital raise. And there was a time when we thought about just letting creators fund this. And so again, it was really by creators for creators. We ended up shifting a little bit away from that, but we have a nice pool where they're still also supporting. So they have some skin in the game here as well.
So do you have a lead investor at this point?
We have a lead investor at this point. Yeah, that's the 7-figure investor. And then again, we have several others that are in the 750 range that are, again, very strategic for us. And
can you share with us just a couple of names of who is investing in the round?
Yeah, I'm happy to share a couple. So, I kind of mentioned some Asian roots and kind of some markets that are important to us. So there's a group called Arcstream Capital that is, really entrenched in the China market. We've got a group called Liquify Ventures that we're really excited about, that have forays into Hong Kong, into China, into Korea, et cetera. So there's, certain groups like that really, we feel are going to be really beneficial to us once we actually launch. We've had some previous support from groups like Genesis Block Ventures, et cetera. So leaving it a little bit light on that front.
Right. Well, so tell me with regards to these investors, how did you meet them? Did you actually meet them? Did you have Zoom calls? Are you just exchanging emails? What does that look like?
That's probably been the most unique part of this entire experience. I mean, traditionally, you would probably meet people and handshakes and, looking in the eyes, that kind of stuff. As we all know, the founder aspect is really important, right? You're investing in the person halfway, especially at this stage. No, in this case, it was a lot of, like Telegram and messaging. And again, warm introductions have probably been the biggest key here. So like some certain advisors or previous investors have, who are big supporters of us, have been essentially introducing us to their networks. And then we have, 3, 4, whatever conversations to kind of dig in. And even now we're able to show demos and that kind of stuff. And that's kind of how it's been. So never had that experience before, the whole Telegram and text-based stuff.
What I know that you're doing this remotely. Again, like you said, it's not in a traditional sense where you're meeting, people, face to face, at a local restaurant or, somebody's office. So, but do you get a sense of the tone of these discussions that you've had with these people? I mean, would you categorize them in any particular way, or have they been different? What kind of generally, how would you categorize it?
Yeah, it's definitely a good question. And again, having the perspective of being an investor myself, like what would I do in their shoes has been a pretty repeated question for myself. So I would say that, people are cautious, but we've done a lot of things to de-risk the situation for investors. Again, having the list of creators continuously growing, we try to be really diligent on updates in general. So as things progress over, whatever, if it's monthly or quarterly, whatever, as things progress, we try to share notes. And that doesn't just go out to our current investors. It goes out to people we're just in talks with that haven't necessarily committed. So that's been a big deal. The larger investors, that you've most likely heard of, are the more traditional Silicon Valley-based investors. They're looking at this from a totally different perspective too, whether it's like bets in the entire vertical, or whether it's like, what traction level are you at? Can we see can we see the app or the beta, et cetera, et cetera. So there's definitely been a little bit of guarding, but I would say that even though COVID's here and everything, people are still very actively, deploying capital and wanting to make things happen.
How often did you have to meet or communicate with these investors before they were willing to make a commitment? And what type of challenges have you been facing with regards to the communications?
Yeah. So, I would say on average, anywhere from, as little, we've had a couple, one meeting commitments that's happened, but much more rare. But I would say, 3 or 4 meetings seems to be the average, right. The challenges have, not super challenging. It's just more like time-based. Like our team, even internally, is distributed. We're not in a central office. We're all in different places. We've got, people in LA, San Francisco, Boston, New York, even Austin, Texas, et cetera, even Toronto. So we're kind of all over. So a lot of the challenges have been about coordinating, even calls. We've got, again, investors out of Southeast Asia. So a lot of either early morning calls for the West Coast or late evening calls for the East Coast. That's been fun. So I've had more than my share of, 10, 11, 30 p.m. type of calls.
The time zone is always the challenge, especially because you never know what's coming at you during the day. But at any rate, so So tell us, what single piece of advice would you like to share with our fundraising entrepreneurs that are listening today?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think it's in our nature, right? I'm sure all entrepreneurs, they can paint their picture, sell their vision, et cetera, and communicate that. A lot of times I would just encourage all of us, and I'm saying us intentionally, when it doesn't feel right, when the fit's not there, not to try to twist the arm, right? Like recognize that it's probably not a good investor. Like if I have to convince someone that, creator economy or influencers in general, can make an impact to B2B situations or to brands in general, then it's probably not the best fit. So I would encourage, founders to continue looking. There's lots of investors, lots of groups trying to deploy money, and the right ones are out there. And so it's just a matter of continuing through that, through that shuffle and hustle and finding the people that align with your vision versus trying to convince every single investor. No's are good. You want to get through all those no's, and as much as you can, as much as they can be authentic, get that feedback. Why? A lot of times it's just, hey, it's not in our remit. It's not what we were looking for. We're looking for something very specific, and this doesn't fit. So don't get dejected. Keep going and find the right fit from an investor standpoint, the right partner.
Great advice. Certainly makes life a lot easier. So, Rusty, how can people get in touch with you if they have an interest in perhaps partnering with you or even investing?
Yeah, appreciate
into your project.
And creators out there that are looking to be on our platform, fans that are looking to check us out, definitely go to Calaxy.com. That's Calaxy.com, and reach out. My personal email is just Rusty@Calaxy.com. Super simple. Definitely still always going to be looking for creators. Obviously happy to have fans, and then from an investor standpoint, if there's something, if this aligns, if people are looking at things like social tokens or creator economy and beyond, I think would love to talk to you and see if there's a fit. And you're always looking for strategic value for sure.
Fantastic, Rusty. Thank you for coming on today's show. We appreciate you sharing your story and being gracious with your time.
Thank you, Keith. Really appreciate it. Great to be here.
Terrific. For other tech founders or VC founders that have a funding story they would like to share, please contact us through our podcast webpage at auraco.com. That's it for today's podcast. So in the meantime, keep funding and disrupting.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Funding and Disrupting. Don't forget to visit our sponsor, auraco.com, to learn more about working directly with Oura Collective's exclusive technology PR team. They'll help you craft your message, get noticed in the press, and help you get your venture to the funding finish line. Again, you can visit them at www.auraco.com. Keep funding and keep disrupting.